Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Lemons. Welcome to our next edition of the Woke Book Club at DSA. Today's book is written by our resident author, Mr. Clint Chico. The title of the book is called Island Games. And just to kind of interest you a little bit into this story, here's what we have. We have a skate punk, a genius, a jock, a mean girl, surfer, liar, cheater, racist, a psychopath. 12 teenagers are dropped on the island as part of a brand new reality TV show. Everything they were told was a lie. Now the question isn't who will win, it's who will survive. Let the games begin. So we're going to ask Mr. Chico about this story. And we have Cedar, we have Mylea, and we also have Caitlin, who is going to ask some questions or make their own comments about this book. So, Cedar, would you like to start?
I liked it. It was really interesting. It's not what I normally read. I normally read fantasy. Like, that's my go-to. So it was fun to read. Mr. Chico, you did okay. Yeah. I didn't like your formatting, but you did a
Okay.
good job.
No. Listen. It's fine because I need feedback like that. A lot of times, people only look for the good stuff. I need to hear, and I knew I was taking a risk with this book anyway. So, and I've been told that before. So I need to hear what works and what doesn't, and I need feedback from readers. So no, it's totally cool. And there's no rule that says you have to like everything about a book in order to like the book.
That's true. That's true. But one of the questions I want to ask you is, I noticed that you did do quite a few of the characters, but there were some that you intentionally did not do. Is that very intentional, or is it because, well, I'll let you fill in that
So
way.
when you're saying do the characters, I assume you mean
Voices.
ones that are there's certain chapters that are dedicated to certain
Right.
characters.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I wanted to do in this book, because it's not what I typically do in my books, is write first person and from multiple POVs, from multiple points of view, mainly to see if I could do it. And especially early in the book, I knew it would make it kind of hard to follow because it does jump around some. But that was the risk I was going to take doing that. Now, as far as who I chose to follow, there are 12 kids on the show, plus a host and a producer and other people. So it's a matter of who do you want to focus on. When you have an ensemble cast that large, one of my jobs as an author is to help the reader focus on these characters are more important than these characters. These are the ones that you need to follow. These are the ones,
Okay.
Because the first thing that you guys are going to do is look for who's the protagonist here. Who am I supposed to follow? And I can't follow 12, right? So I need to narrow it down. If you look as far as the number of chapters and who gets mentioned the most, Annika is a main character, PG is a main character,
Mhm.
Tony is a main character.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as a main, it's PG and it's Annika. And if you look, the book begins with Annika and it ends with Annika. And that was done on purpose. I wanted to introduce a lot of characters early on and then help you focus as the book goes on.
No, I would have liked a chapter or two, but about the psychopath and with the psychopath. I'm serious because
Yeah.
when that character came into the book, I was like,
So
ooh, I wanted to know more about that person, like that whole.
So for me, the good guys are where the story really is. The psychopath that you're talking about is a character in the book, and I won't say too much because
Right.
it's a little bit supposed to be hidden who it is. It's more for me. The story is more about the kids and how they deal with the situation that is there.
Oh, okay.
So if you dedicate a chapter to that, first off, it would be really difficult for me to write from the point of view of and because the dude is crazy. And it's not as interesting to me because there's nothing that he's really going through. There's no struggle for him because he's the one in power, right? Now, I did give so there's a character in the book, Daniel. He's one of the kids. but he is not one of the nice kids, right? He got a chapter, maybe two. He got at least one. And I did that partly because I needed a way to introduce what was going to happen in that chapter, and it made sense that it be from his point of view. But also, it gives another way of look. So you got all these kids who are together. How would someone who doesn't feel like part of the group view them? And especially somebody who's been an outcast. He's a teenager. Everybody understands how that feels. But especially if you sort of self-isolate, right? You're somebody who intentionally keeps yourself out from the crowd. How would they view these kids who have kind of come together, you know? And that kind of allowed me to write from the point of view of somebody who is not a nice guy, which is challenging for me because I'm a nice guy. No, it forces me to, as an author, to kind of find that part of when you write first. You're an actor, right? When you act on stage, you have to find part of yourself in the role, right? I don't do a ton of acting, but I've done a tiny bit. As an author, that's kind of what I have to do with my characters, is I have to find myself in the character. And people like Annika and PG and Tony, it's real easy because, you know, there's a lot of me in there. Someone like Daniel or Carter, it's much harder, but I know the potential to be a jerk like that is in there. And so I have to find that part of me that I normally suppress and put that out there, so that those characters feel real too, right? I'm not as much of a jerk as they are, hopefully, but I know that I could be because we all have that potential, right? So my job as an author is to find myself in those characters so that the characters come off as real. So
Okay, so
that's what I try and do anyway.
So speaking of real, I noticed that the survivor kind of theme was the backdrop, and when we had a conversation earlier, you said you love Survivor.
Yes.
So this is this gave you the whole. But you mentioned to me about the islands and
Okay, yeah. So this is a contemporary book. It's written in modern day. There's a lot of stuff in there that's real. There's a lot of stuff in there that's fake. It is fiction, right? A show like Island Games doesn't exist, but there are a lot of shows out there that do exist that are like that. Survivor's one. I've been a fan of Survivor since it came out in 2000, and I've watched every single season since, 20 some odd years. So I know that show and that situation and stuff really, really well. The whole reason the book exists, I was watching with my wife one day, because we watched together, and the idea occurred to me, what would happen if they put teenagers on this? Now they've done stuff like that before, right? So that's not. I mean, they haven't done a Teenage Survivor, but books like that are out there, stories like that are out there. So I knew I would need some kind of twist on top of that, and then so I thought, okay, teenagers on Survivor, but what if the show isn't real, like at all? Like a lot of times, you know, especially with reality TV, right? The audience is always playing with, well, what is real, what isn't real? How much of what I'm watching is, you know, actually what took place? And first off, people in the business don't refer to it as reality TV. We call it unscripted, right? Because when you say reality, people expect real, and it's not. Even documentaries are somebody's point of view on what happened. Unless you're talking about like a straight up news article or something, it's going to be a little bit. There's going to be some untruth in there, or some kind of somebody's perspective. But reality versus not real is a spectrum. It's variance, right? You have stuff like American Idol, which is very, very, very real because money's involved. I guarantee you this: if there's ever a contest or something where money is involved, they are keeping that legit, because if they don't, they get the crap sued out of them. Then you have personality stuff like the Kardashians and whatnot, where they make up stuff all the time, right? I mean, they are playing personas of themselves, right? This falls somewhere in the middle. The idea is that the show is supposed to be real, but it's not. And the people on it think it's real, but it's not. So then I had to come up with, okay, so why would someone fake that? And that was the biggest twist of the whole thing, is you know, about halfway through writing it, I still didn't know why they were faking the show. And obviously I had to work that out for any of it to make sense. Now, the islands that they take place on, I knew what I wanted to have happen. This is where I kind of work backwards. This is working backwards research. I knew what I wanted to write. I knew where I wanted, I wanted multiple islands that were really small, really secluded, that they could use for the show. And they need to have a reason for it to fake the show there. I used a shipwreck. The show is a cover for them going down and salvaging something off of the shipwreck because they don't want anybody knowing that they're going after it. So they're using the show as an excuse to shoot there. So then I had to work backwards. Okay, so where am I putting this? So basically, God bless the internet, I scour the map and I look for archipelagos where this could take place. And there's one off the coast of Guinea-Bissau, which is a small, tiny little country off the west coast of Africa. I'd never heard of it. But I was like, oh, this is perfect because there could be a shipwreck there, and it's small, and it's a democratic country that no one really pays attention to.
That's true.
It's not like if they tried to shoot in Cuba or something, they could never get away with that. People would know. Here, off the coast of nowhere, it would work. So there's some stuff in the book that I researched that I wanted. Here's what I want to have happen. Like, where is it going to take place? There's some stuff that I researched. I need to make sure that this is possible, like the drones. There's some stuff like that like, in the show is basically unmanned, meaning they have robotic cameras and stuff all over the place. Now, they would never actually shoot a TV show that way. They could, theoretically. But first off, they can take 12 kids and drop them unsupervised on an island? God, no, right? That's the worst idea ever. But let's say they did. The idea is they've got security cameras and stuff watching them. The reason I did that was because I realized very, very early on, the more cast I have around the kids, number one, the less likely they are to act like kids, right? You want to Lord of the Flies them a little bit. To do that, you have to take away the authorities. And the other thing is, the more people you have around, the more characters you have to deal with. And so I came up with the idea of, they need secrecy to pull off the heist thing that they're doing. So it makes sense that they wouldn't have a very big staff, and that they would have robot cameras and things like that. Now, the thing with the drones is they don't really exist yet, because either you can have very, very small drones, which do exist, or you can have drones that can carry video cameras and stuff, but they've got to be larger. So I kind of faked the technology on that one, in that you have very, very small drones that also shoot video. They don't really have those yet. Not like that. Not like, on the shows where they shoot drone shots and stuff, you're talking about something that's almost the size of a car. And especially military drones and things like
I
that,
was just
much
going to
larger.
say,
Yeah.
I have a feeling the military probably already has something like that.
Yeah.
We just don't know about it.
But they're much larger, yeah. Now, I did steal some of that, too. So like, there's a scene where PG and Beck are steering a drone remotely, right, by joystick or whatever. That's legit. The military does that now. They can, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, steer a drone over. They use it to, bomb people or whatever, right? We just use it to videotape stuff. I didn't want to, Oh, I also threw tasers on there too. I don't think that's, I don't think you can really pull that off. But it sounded cool. So there's a little bit of science fiction in there. But that's the key too, is when you're dealing with fantasy, works this way too. A lot of times people read fantasy, and what really it annoys fantasy authors who don't understand this idea. They'll say, how can you say my fantasy world isn't realistic? Because, it's fantasy, but you still have to have rules that you can follow, right? So if I could explain how you can have a drone that has a taser thing and things like that, and make it make sense, then I can do it. But you have to build up that system of belief so that whether it's Harry Potter, a dragon, whatever, the Matrix, something like that doesn't really exist, you have to make people believe it can exist, and then you're off to the races. So there's stuff in there that's real and true, and because I built off of that, the rest of the stuff feels true. Or hopefully.
Did you have any favorite parts or favorite characters?
Oh, PG's my favorite. That was easy.
Yay.
That was easy?
Yeah.
Love PG? My
I
Leia?
didn't have a favorite character, but I did have a favorite part. The twist with everything being fake. When I first started the book, I was like, okay, is this gonna be like Hunger Games? Because I love Hunger Games and I love the dystopian like feel to it. But then I was like, oh, this is feeling like a little bit too real to be like that. And then I was like, like getting further into it, I was like, maybe like Lord of the Flies, like where everybody just kills each other. Like I would enjoy that. But then at the end, when it's just like, oh, nothing was really real in the first place, I was just like, oh, that's kind of like a bummer because what's the point of sitting me here and getting me to do that? But I like being cheated like that when I'm reading something because it adds more of a feel to it that I don't really get when I read other books.
Cool. Yeah, I text him a lot because first of all, he can text.
I know, I love that. Because authors normally don't get that kind of instant feedback if somebody's reading your stuff. You know?
I was like, PG. I was like, and then when I found out, it said, wait till you find out what her name's. I'm like, for real? You came up with that name for her? I was like, okay. And then PG was 12 years old. I said, 12 is not a teenager. I kind of, he's like.
So you brought it up. I want to address a couple things. So
Okay.
First off, making PG 12. You really you had trouble with that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. If you watch like kids baking shows and things like that, right? The kids on those shows, the oldest kids are 12 and 11. There are 8-year-old, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds on those shows. There's one that we watched in the spring. The kids are on there because they have their own baking company, right? They run an online company, and they're like 8 and 9 years old. And so PG being 12 and being as smart as she is and being able to pull off the stuff she is, that's not really much of a stretch. Now, most 12-year-olds can't. But, you'll see the stuff online all the time. Kids 14, 15, and they're in college, right?
True that. That's true.
She's 16 with a master's degree and that kind of thing. Those kind of kids are out there. I just put her in the book. Now, the thing that with that is a lot of times when you advance that fast age-wise, it disassociates you from your peers because other 12-year-olds aren't doing that kind of thing. I made her a high school junior, I think I said in the book, which at 12 is really something, right? And there's parts where she doesn't really know how to interact with the people around her, with Tony, with Beck especially. And I did that on purpose. That's one of the things I wanted to examine was, peer-to-peer relationships when you are so far ahead of everybody. And I mentioned the fact of something, I said something like the fact that PG probably could be in college if he wanted to, but she only skipped a couple grades, that kind of thing. Because I always look at when I hear about kids who are really advanced, 12, 13, 14 and in college and that kind of thing, I always wonder, was it their call or their parents or, that kind of thing. I'll mention too the name because there's a bunch of goofy names in the book. At this point, with as many books as I've written, because people ask about character names and stuff, I steal names from all over the place.
You have so many students.
Yeah. So listen, I had back when we were virtual, I had a student who wrote a script, and he's like, "Yeah, I said, what's your main character's name?" Ontario. I said, "Your protagonist's name is Ontario?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm stealing that. And so my third book had a side character whose name was Ontario. Because I was like, dude, that's the best name ever. PG and Tony. Tony's real name is Princeton Howard Brown. Okay? Hang on. Here's literally how I got those names. I woke up out of a dream one night, and I grabbed my phone, and I literally typed Princeton Howard Brown. Her mom wants her to go to college. I closed my phone. I went back to sleep. I woke up in the morning. And I saw this. I was like, "What am I doing with this?" I don't, And this was at least a year before I wrote Island Games, before I even started it. I didn't know if Princeton was going to be a main character. I didn't know if she had a whole book in her or whatever. And so when I was looking for characters to put into this, I was like, Tony. Because you can't go yelling Princeton down the hall, right? So her mom calls her Tony. PG was the same way. I don't remember if it was a dream or somewhere, I was like, there's a kid, and she's little, but she's advanced, and they call her PG, like parental guidance.
Why when we said that?
Because she's a little kid. They call her PG. In the book, I spell it P-E-E-G-E-E, PG.
He does.
And I needed a reason to, and so I gave her a real name, Priscilla Grace. Because my mom had a friend whose name was Priscilla. We were really close, that kind of thing. And Grace, I just like the name. So, you know, if you're going to call her PG, I had to. One of the guys' name is Beckham. I don't remember where I came up with that. I just thought it sounded cool, I think. Called him Beck. So, I mean, like, here's the thing. Sometimes the name thing works, sometimes it doesn't. But what I don't want is book after book after book with James and Michael and Robert and Sally and whatever, you know, and that's fine, you know, but I need, you know, and especially because part of this too is, you know, and this is legit. If you're going to cultivate a cast for a show like this, it's going to be diverse, right? Mm-hmm. Survivor is doing that now. Back when, you know, in the early 2001 seasons, you know, there would be like the black guy, you know, maybe one or two cast members who were ethnic in some way or something. Now, right? Now, if you right, exactly. If you look at Survivor now, at least half the class, at least half of the cast are people of color. There's always 2 or 3 at least who are openly gay. There's been transgender Survivor cast members. There have been, you know, all over the spectrum, Hispanic and Latina and Asian and everything, right? And so if you are going to do that with teenagers, part of the deal is it has to be representational, right? And so that allows me to put characters like that in there and have it feel authentic. Because if they were going to do a show like that for real, that is exactly how they would cast it, right? And so I tried to make sure that it felt diverse like that, you know. It wasn't just the black girl, there's several of them.
Right.
It wasn't just, you know. And another thing that I kind of got to play with, each person kind of has a counterpoint, and I mentioned that kind of stuff too. Mm-hmm. Beck is a football player, and Jason's a football player, that kind of thing. Because that's kind of how it would go down too, is they would look for physical stats and physical things and mental traits and that kind of thing.
I think one of the characters mentioned that too, that there was like a point, counterpoint,
Mm-hmm.
but there was also someone else who had one of those traits that they
Right.
could, yeah. So that was pretty clever. I like that.
Question.
Yes.
So while reading, I kind of felt like, did you like get any inspiration from the characters from your students? Like, did you see DSA and put any of them in the...
So I get asked that sometimes, and I don't intentionally do things like that. But what I do is the same way that I kind of cultivate names, I cultivate personality traits, right? I cultivate, like there's a little bit of me in Annika and in PG and Tony and in Beck, but they're not me, right? And so there's no character who is like, this is like Cedar, this one's like, you know, there's nothing like that. But I know kids who talk like Beck and behave like Tony and think like PG, right? I still remember about a year ago, we were talking about Marcia's sophomore slump.
Yep.
And you talked about patience and the fact that, so in that book, patience is like the original PG. She's genius, she's black, she's female. Unlike PG, Patience was gay, because that was part of the story. And you mentioned, well, I love the fact that, you know, she's not what you would stereotypically think of as a black girl, because she's very take charge, she's very, you know, monstrously intelligent. And I said, this is Kendra Renee Sanders. Because, and I didn't even realize it when I was writing her. Kendra came to me one day, she's like, I have a photographic memory. And she legit does, right? Yeah. The girl wrote a movie and it's on Tubi or whatever, and you know, she's insane, she's nuts. She wrote a play, bought out the theater, threw me in it, and did right?
Sure did.
Crazy. So I pick up bits and pieces of the people around me, and I don't typically do it intentionally. there are things like, Annika's gay because I've got a lot of kids like that, right? I stole Annika's name from my cousin in Canada. She named her daughter Annika. I'm like, that's a bad name. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to bleep that too, by the way.
No, I say throw it in.
but when I hear a great name like that, I'm like, I gotta, but personality-wise, she's a little bit me, she's a little bit my wife, she's a little bit kids that I know, that kind of thing. And so, positive traits or negative traits in some ways, because I've known kids like Daniel, I've known kids like Jace, who was a jerk, I've known kids like Carter, who was racist. I've known people like that, and so I don't base them on one of the kids, but
But it helps.
yeah, you end up doing that anyway. And with any kind of art, you borrow from the people and stuff around you, whether you mean to or not. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Okay, you had some really interesting challenges. Those games. Which one was your favorite? Or all of them your favorites?
So early on, they don't know the show is fake.
Right.
So it's going on like it's real. And so on Survivor and shows like that, they put the people through challenges. You win the challenges, you get to stay in the game. You lose, you have to vote somebody out. That part's like Survivor. Shows have been borrowing that from Survivor since day one. So I knew two things. Number one, I have to invent something original because I can't just steal the stuff they do on Survivor. Two, I wanted stuff. So part of when you write something is everything needs to be a reason to have it in the book, right? I have an opportunity with these challenges not just to have them in there, but to showcase who the kids are in there, right?
Okay.
So you need to have challenges. There's one that I love. It might be the second one. I don't remember. Part of it is strength. Part of it is speed. Part of it is something else, right? And so there's an obstacle course they have to get through. PG, being a little 12-year-old kid, threw it. I mean, like, I have her throwing herself up on, there's monkey bars. She throws herself up on the monkey bars and runs across the
That's
monkey
how I do
bar.
monkey bars, man.
Right. And so there was a part in my brain that was like, this might be a little too much. And then I remembered, dude, I had a freshman in my class one year, different school, did a backflip in the middle of the class. Just, I've seen, right. Right.
All the time.
I've seen kids do, and these are kids who are not gymnasts, they're not, but they are incredibly athletic and talented in all these weird ways, and I thought it totally makes sense that someone like PG would have this skill too. So the ones where you're able to see either physical traits or personality traits kind of shine through that. Tyranny, who isn't necessarily a great character, has some flaws.
Liked her.
Right, good. Did you like her? Not like her. I'm sorry.
I liked her.
You liked her, good.
Yeah.
Okay. I listen. People ask me and ask other authors all the time, how much did you have planned out, that kind of thing. I didn't know if I was going to like Tyranny when I started. That's another name that I stole. Somebody had a name tag. Right. I know that, right?
Not too still.
I'm walking through Target. I look over and there's Tyranny. I'm like, that's a great name. I'm going to write that one down. But I didn't know if I was going to like her or not as a character, and whether to, a whole redemption arc, that kind of thing. I hadn't decided that yet until I thought, okay, what's the most interesting way to tackle this? And it's kind of boring if she's just mean. If she's mean and there's a backstory, if there's something going on underneath the surface. And so part of the deal with the challenges is we get to see her hit adversity, run into problems, and how does she deal with it, right? Does she crumble or not? There's a challenge with her and Annika and Jace. That's the one where Annika ends up getting voted out. And you can kind of see, okay, she's trying hard. She's a cheerleader. That's it. You've got to be really athletic to be a cheerleader. You've got to have a certain personality to do that. And so she's not a quitter. She's not somebody, and yet she lets people use her and she uses other people, right? And so by not just throwing something like a challenge in there and just letting it sit, I'm going to find ways to make it interesting, hopefully a little bit. It's a book. Still, you got to try to make it interesting visually when you picture it, but put these kids in situations where we can see the best and the worst of them come out, because that's really what it's about.
Yeah, I didn't like Tierney, and I said, okay, is she gonna be this typical dumb blonde, you know? But she really redeemed herself at the end. I gotta give him props for, cause she did some serious with her cheerleading skills. She did some serious moves that had some characters almost crying. I'm
She kicked a dude in the face. That's what she's talking
I
about.
like when she started kicking people, yeah.
I-
That description of that soccer kick was really good. Like, that was helpful. I used that. It worked so well.
I was like, the next thing you know, like, wow! I was like, oh Lord, you better do right, cause you. But
That's
yes,
better do right.
Tierney redeemed her. He did a good job redeeming Tierney, because I was like, okay, we gonna have some stereotypical characters, not this dumb blonde. Please, no.
But the blondes
But
are
they're
usually the
iconic.
best. Though.
They're iconic.
I love movies where they have like a dumb blonde and like I don't even care if they don't even redeem themselves in that. Like, I hate Clueless, but actually no, I hate Clueless. That's not nice. I hate it.
She's so iconic. The Closet.
Whatever.
You never seen Clueless?
No.
Talk about
She
it.
married her stepbrother. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, okay. Well,
That part's
part-
problematic.
That
yes.
part is problematic.
That's the whole reason why I hate it.
Her computer is set to like have everything in her closet, so she can basically try on her clothes without trying on her clothes and pulling things actually out of her closet.
Hey,
That's so iconic.
That was cool.
And see, that's the thing too, is that there's characters who you might think of as a dumb blonde because she sort of is in that movie, but
But
there's
that's a
other
great
sides to them
idea.
too.
Yeah.
That, and it's not always about good side, bad side, redeeming not. It's more figuring out what's underneath and whatnot.
Right. And-
Like Beck, who's a football player. He's a freshman, I think I made him. He's not that intelligent, but he's a good kid, right? But he's not the kind of guy you'd think would be really, really smart. But he knows how to fly the drones. Why? Because he plays video games.
Right.
And it's a video game controller, right? And I mean, and that's something I like. I can run a flight simulator because I played video games in middle school and high school, and I got really into airplanes and how. I mean, like, I understand flight schematics and stuff. And you put me in a flight simulator, and I can fly it. Beck was the same way because that's legit.
Okay, that's legit.
And it's a skill that you wouldn't anticipate somebody like him because he's just big. He's big, and
Yeah.
you know, you normally think big and dumb, but he's not, right? It's just a different kind of intelligence.
Yeah. I didn't think of him as a dumb jock by no means. I just knew, and I like the way that you did round out some of these characters and give us a backstory to give us an insight that, you know, they're not your stereotypical ones. Even though you had me going with Tierney for a minute, you kept saying, hang in there, Tierney. You know, you told me, and you were right, Tierney.
I would never tell her nothing.
No,
Suffer.
trust me. He's like, everything is not what it seems. He'll leave me little sentences like that, and so I had to sit here and, for real, you just gonna leave me like that. And he did.
Chico is such a Batman.
Well, and one of the things that you get from writing in first person, it's one of the benefits and one of the things that's difficult about it, is that you can put a lot of how they feel and how they see things
That's true.
in there.
That's true.
The Beck chapters are written in his voice. The PG and the Tony chapters and the Annika chapters are written in their voice, and the Mandy chapters. And so you're able to get insight into their personality and stuff a little bit easier than when I write my third person stuff. The trick is that I have to shift from one character's
Right, the
voice to-
voices. Yeah,
yeah.
make sure the voices
Yeah.
are different. and
It's
unique.
it's like doing a one-man show or a one-woman show and trying to play all the characters in your head, and that gets tricky. Because occasionally I forget whose chapter I try to write.
Who are you?
Right, yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh, why would you kill her? What's her name?
Okay.
Why would you do that?
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's a
So
spoiler,
it's,
but why
it's
would
a
you do that?
it's a little bit of a spoiler. If you don't want to know, skip this part. So there's a character and that's a great question because it was absolutely intentional and I needed to. So
I was shocked.
here, good. So
I was not. That was
part of it is people are going to think it's shock value, and it's not. the reason that they do the show, what they're faking, there's nuclear weapons that they're pulling out of the ocean. This is how crazy the guy is. Now, you have to believe that this guy is dangerous. Because the tone, the first half of the book especially, pretty light. The stakes are very low. You know, it's basically who's going to win the show? Oh, there is no show. There's no $1 million, then what do I care, right? And so the stakes are almost non-existent. Then PG and Beck get captured. The stakes increase a little bit, right? They're getting physically hurt. You know, people are getting injured. In order for you to understand that this is real, that the stakes all of a sudden jump a lot, there's a producer, Miranda, who works on the show. She's basically the only adult that the kids interact with.
Right.
They capture her too because they think that she knows what's, and she does know. She's going to tell people that they're getting the nukes. So the guy in charge captures her, tortures her. They bring PG in. Do you know who? Do you know what we're getting? She's like, I don't know. Pull Miranda out. Put a gun to her head. Tell us what we're pulling out of the ocean. She's like, so swear to God, I don't know. They count to 5. PG's screaming, crying, I don't know, because she doesn't know. He says, okay, I believe you. But she knows. Shoots Miranda in the head and kills her. Right in front of PG. That's a good expression.
Why would you traumatize the child?
Because here's why. You as a reader have to understand the stakes just jumped exponentially. PG as a character has to understand the stakes just jumped exponentially. Near the end of the book, they've got Annika and they've got Mandy and the other characters held at gunpoint. You have to believe at least a little bit that their life is in jeopardy.
Right.
Because if you don't, the book's not going to work.
So somebody has to die.
Somebody has to die. And this is going to hurt. You take the nicest character and you kill them. You take somebody like not PG. We're not killing a kid, but you take but somebody who you could get away with that and do it.
Right.
But that's why Miranda and not say the goofy host guy, right? Whose name all of a sudden I can't remember.
Yeah. God, I would have.
Right. Because for a loss to matter in whether it's a book or a movie, it has to be somebody that you're going to miss.
I
And
get
it
it.
has to
Right.
hurt.
That goofy
Right.
guy, if he would have died, it was just like praise.
And the reason I used PG for that scene is because she's the youngest. Well, it seems like she knows more about the world and whatnot because she's so intelligent. She's very sheltered, right?
Right.
And
That
I even
makes
make the
sense.
point. People think I grew up in Chicago. I didn't. I grew up, in a little suburbs.
Right.
Had I grown up in Chicago, I might have been around death before.
Right.
Um,
Got to. That makes sense.
There's people in Detroit who have seen death.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's me who grew up in the suburbs. PG grew up in the suburbs. She's 12. I had to, traumatize her.
So you intentionally
Yes.
traumatized the 12-year-old just to prove a point?
No,
Yeah, I get it.
Not to prove it, but to make you as a reader feel.
Because
That's my entire job.
There's been other
Yeah.
survival things, and I'm going to keep referencing back to Hunger Games. It's
Totally
my
cool.
favorite. Where they've done the same thing, where the
Yes.
host was a complete maniac and they had to kill kids and
Yeah.
kill people that were favorable. And I hate it, but it's needed though. It's what's complete the story.
That's
It was
why
makes it the story.
Rue, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
just said that.
I know.
She
right.
wasn't that much of a loss for me. She was only in one movie.
Wow.
But Primrose,
Primrose.
her seeing her die was like
It's the same thing.
she was the whole reason why we were
The
friends.
audience has to understand the stakes. The audience has to feel it. And yet, let me tell you, writing that scene hurt. Writing that scene really hurt. There's a couple scenes. I've only written a few deaths in all of the books that I've written because most of them are pretty lighthearted, funny stuff. But when that happens, the tough scenes, and not even like the deaths necessarily, but there are tough emotional scenes,
Yeah.
and they are because it's like being an actor. You pour all your empathy into that character. I understand who they are. I really, 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 really did not want to do it, but I knew I needed to for the book to work. So
Yeah. That.
she's got to go.
I understand it, but I will never forgive you.
It's all good. That's totally fair, and I accept it.
Any last comments about this book? Any suggestions?
I liked it. It's just that, I mean, I understand the host and him being greedy and wanting like only to get the things from the ship, the nukes. I understand that because like I watched Total Drama Island and like he was a psychopath. He has a whole list of crimes. So yeah,
He's
I
such
get
an
it.
icon.
He was.
It's always a question with characters is how far is too far.
so mad.
And the simple fact is that, you know, the whole truth is stranger than fiction thing, right? I have yet to write a character that's as out there as stuff in real life. You know, there are real life millionaire psychopaths who, you know, they may or may not be pulling nukes out of the ocean, but they're doing, you know,
They're
crazy.
doing something.
They finance war, right?
Yeah.
They you know, they kill kids for money, you know, and you know those people are out there. They don't.
We were
post
just
TV
talking
shows.
about this, like slave labor. Like
Yeah,
child slavery.
yeah, right.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a
The
whole
big
article
companies.
about slave and how these corporations supposedly don't know that their suppliers are hiring 12 and 13-year-olds to do these dangerous jobs. And so this, but you know, they're claiming we don't know that they because we outsource this to this staffing company, and the
Right.
staffing company, you know, is just taking these kids, and I was like, okay.
And that's another thing that I talk about in there some because there are more layers than just the main guy in charge. It's the idea of I don't want to know what's going on, and so you try and isolate yourself from the evil that's out there, and that's not really a good excuse, right? The guys who are just following orders and that kind of thing, and some of
They're
them
just
are
as
like,
bad.
look, I had no idea, I'm going to take off. And some of them are like, yeah, it wasn't me, right? And so
Yeah, that's
kind of investigating and trying to, and again, it's, you know, it's not that deep of a book, but it gives you a chance to kind of look at things like that, you know, in society.
Definitely. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. It wasn't me. I sent it off to this other company, and then there's a.
Yeah.
This is a good book. I'm not a Survivor fan, but I will tell you, I love this book. I loved all the different characters, and I love their traits, the good, the bad, the indifferent ones. But it was good. And your storyline was I couldn't stop reading it, even though I had to go to work. I'm supposed to be going to work, and I'm staying up to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, finishing.
She went to school at 8:30.
Shush.
Ooh, edit that out.
Timestamp.
What's the timestamp?
It's the truth.
I do it too, but it's
It's
fine.
the truth.
fine.
It's the truth. It is what it is. But it is. You wrote an excellent book, and I highly recommend reading this. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chico.
you.
Any other new projects? Any other new books that you're writing?
Free promo.
Free promo.
Oh, that's right. Forgot. No, the DSA Blues. Is it the DSA?
Art School Blues.
The Art School Blues.
Yep,
Okay.
so
not-
Art School Blues came out in March, April, somewhere around there. So Art School Blues is my newest published book. It is more of a romance. Takes place in a school of the arts. Don't know where I got that idea. So there you go.
So funny.
And I'm currently working on the second Katrina book, and
Okay.
I'm actually very, very, very early on my first fantasy novel, which kind of like Island Games is. Well, it's
So no part 2?
So no, this one's pretty wrapped up.
Yeah.
There's some books that I write as a series. Marcia books are like that. The Katrina books are like that.
This was
There's
a
a couple that I just want to be standalones, and this one
This
was
was
really
a
meant to be a
standalone.
standalone. But yeah, I'm always either in the middle of writing or editing something.
Always.
Because I don't know how to stop.
It does.
It does take. There's usually overlap. The Katrina book that I'm writing now. I was writing while I was editing that one.
Like 50 books.
That ain't a bad thing, though.
No, it's not. But if you're trying to keep up and read, I haven't finished the Marcia
And
series.
then he already just...
He done
That's
moved on
okay.
from Marcia. Now he's on to Katrina. Now he's on to the Art School Blues, and there's a is there a
And
part?
then there's no
I
part
want to
And
read
then
the
there's a
Art School
fantasy
Blues. I'm not gonna lie. I want to read the Art School.
I've heard it's very good.
Do we have? I didn't buy any of those yet.
I don't know.
I haven't bought it. Oh, I gotta buy some then.
One of the interpreters read it, loved it, gave it to her 10-year-old daughter, which I don't know about 10, but the daughter loved it too. So, one of the somebody online read it, and the review they gave me was, "I adore your book, but I can't stop crying." I thought,
Oh no.
But that's exactly what you want, though.
that's exactly what you want. Yeah. I did want to mention one other thing before we.
It is a tearjerker. Oh God.
Well, no, it's a little bit. Again, a lot of humor and joy and stuff in my books, and that's kind of like what I go for. I wanted to mention one thing because I forgot
Sure.
before that. So with Tony and PG especially, I love characters who can outthink people, right?
Okay.
There's a lot of math and STEM stuff in there,
Gosh,
and
yes.
that's legit stuff that I looked online. So like, there's a part where they're trying to figure out our island is here, their island is
Right.
there. How far
Right.
away are we?
To be honest, I skipped some of that.
I did too. I was
Did
like,
you?
I'm tired.
No,
Okay.
no. This is what I did.
So-
I went to
Calculus is
him.
messing me
I
up.
told him. I said, "Look, you draw me these islands, because I'm sitting there trying to figure. Well, it's over here.
So
Give me the visual.
The part that put them to sleep, PG used science and math to figure out how far the islands were, using similar
Where do you
triangles and
find
stuff.
people like
and so,
this? And why do they
because
do
listen,
that?
listen, I nerded out a bit. Okay, so you're like, I'm surprised.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, all the science and math and stuff that's used in there is legit stuff that I looked up online and figured out and made sure it would work and all that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
So you're the manipulator. It's your.
Psychopath.
You're him.
you don't have to be a psychopath to like math.
I think you do though.
Well,
Yes, you do.
No, because
It's like
I
you
was-
wake up and then you like, yeah, I want to be a math teacher.
well, okay. To clarify, I'm not as into math as the kids were, but I knew.
They are.
It's Tony and
Knew
PG.
enough how to do that.
There's a part where Tony's talking about I love numbers and she loves crunching. She ends up being an engineer and whatnot by the end of the book, going into engineering. Somebody who thinks that way, this is how they would solve the problems.
Right.
Somebody who's computer centric like PG, this is how she would solve her problems. I wanted the solutions that she uses and that they use to feel authentic,
It worked.
even if they weren't the most interesting ways.
That's
to
just why I
solve
went
it.
to him. I
I was
said,
like,
"Draw me
this is-
these islands."
this is
'cause
how these
I'm
characters
trying
would
to get
do
the
it.
visual here. It's like, does it occur to you? I was like, "Oh no, here we go." I said, "You gonna draw me these islands so I can visualize all of this? Because this, well, if you go this far left or if you go this far right, then you be, we're good."
I don't know nothing about that. Like
I do understand where you're coming from though, because with my first Marcia book, Marcia plays soccer. I love soccer, right? And so there's several scenes in the first book where she's playing soccer, and one of the people are like, "I really loved your book. I skipped all the soccer crap though because I didn't." It's like, okay. So I, and again, you don't have to like everything in a book to like the book. So I totally get it. It's not a problem at all. I totally get it. Yep.
Okay, well, I had to get some copies of Art School Blues. Art School Blues. Oh yeah, I had to get some copies. Thank you again, Mr. Chico,
Very
for
welcome.
writing such a really. This is an excellent book. I really enjoyed it, and they enjoyed it as well. Thank you. All right.
I'm not gonna lie, if it was me, I would just be like, let's walk in this direction for like 5-10 minutes. If we don't see anything, let's walk back.